Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, best place for long-term stock investors. I know you guys are definitely waiting for this video. A lot of you has been asking for it, so here it is. Now in this video, we will be talking about, of course, in Dato Sri Najib's potential for getting into jail, and more importantly, how has his policies affected the stock market, and now that he might be going to jail, how will this affect the stock market? Now, as a disclaimer, none of what I say should be taken as financial advice. It's purely educational. Now guys, it actually doesn't matter who is in power and whether or not Dato Sri Najib goes to jail. One thing you definitely need to do is to level up your stock investing skills with our free training. So our free training is an opportunity for you to learn how you can build a 6 to 7 figure stock portfolio. Interested? Go into the comments or the description to sign up. Okay, I will start off by giving my views as to what is the ideal policy that any Prime Minister can have that will benefit the stock market, right? At the end of the day, it's the policies that matter. But before that, if you are living under a rock, here's what's happening. Our ex-Prime Minister, Dato Sri Najib, has been apparently sent to prison thanks to his 1MDB fiasco. He will also be fined 210 million. I believe this will be the first time a former Prime Minister will be heading to jail. Now, here are some of the reasons or some of the items that I would like to see in the policy of any Prime Minister, not just in Malaysia, but probably worldwide. And the first one is that there needs to be attractiveness created for foreigners, right? Whether in the form of foreign direct investments, right, which will affect a lot of local suppliers, local companies, but as well as foreign ownership, right? Because at the end of the day, Malaysia is a small country, and we always need, right, non-Malaysians to invest as well. And so this means that the policies created must be friendly for them and allow foreign ownership, so that they will feel like even though they're in a foreign country, the company, that they will get a big chunk of the rewards as well by tapping into the country's resources. Linked to that is PLC reform. So there is the 30% rule in Malaysian companies where 30% typically, especially in the main market, where 30% of the shareholders need to be of the Bumi Putra status. This of course means, right, that there's quite a bit less for foreign ownership or even founders, right, when they want to go for listing. You know, imagine if you are a founder and you realize you have to give up no matter what 30% of your shares to a group of people. Now, the third one obviously will be managing the country's budget. Malaysia is in a deficit, a growing deficit. So the policies that will help Malaysia, you know, improve the budget in terms of more revenue and manageable expenses will be good for the countries and will be good for people outside looking in, right? They will improve the credit ratings and things like that. And then, of course, the last one would be transparency. Don't need to explain much on that. So let's look at what has happened actually under BN and more specifically under Najib's time, right, when he was Prime Minister. Now, the simple fact is that, you know, since 2009 when he came into power all the way until when he lost it in the middle of 2018, the stock market has been going up. Yes, it was a bit flat since 2014 until the end of his reign. But basically, he has, you know, stock market has done better. Whereas once the opposition took over, the stock market is just not looking as good. Now, yes, some of it can be attributed to COVID and a whole host of other things, political upheaval, whatnot. And yeah, so these are, you know, the facts are the facts. And all the way until the 1MDB saga, right, which introduced probably somewhere in 2015 or really heated up, right, in 2015. You know, the ringgit was actually dropping, right, from 3 I want to say 360, 370, 3.7, drop all the way until even below 3 at some point. But of course, since then, it's been, only up, unfortunately. But this was during, the first half of Najib's reign. So, Dato Sri Najib actually had policy objectives, right? In 2009 when he came in, the first one obviously is to grow into a high income status by 2020. And hopefully essentially double, right, the per capita annual income to a level that is, very good. And then the last bit is to empower private sector and empower the private sector and also improve worker productivity. So he is quite a pro-growth kind of prime minister in terms of his policies, at least. So in terms of the foreign ownership, right, to get foreigners to be involved, he wanted to encourage more FDI by allowing foreigners to have, majority stakes, right, in what we call non-strategic enterprises or non-strategic sectors. And so these strategic sectors are things like banking, telecommunications, and oil and gas. But everything else, foreigners can actually own a big majority. So that was one of his objectives, policy objectives. And he also wanted to reduce Bumiputra ownership in PLCs from about 30% to 12.5%. So that is in my view, a step in the right direction in terms of PLC reform. That was very positive of him, actually. Now the next bit is the budget, right? The budget, he introduced, I think, a big one, right, on the revenue portion of the tax budget, the revenues received through taxation. He introduced the GST, right? This was a big debate during the 2018 general elections. But essentially, when it was introduced in 2015 to 2017, it grew, right? It went from nearly 22 billion to doubling, essentially, to 44 in 2017. And the key is the share of the tax revenues also essentially doubled. So that's, pretty amazing. So then, of course, 2018 happened and there was a transition back into SST. And unfortunately, the numbers, although very consistent, but, essentially it dropped from 2019 to 2021 to about a flat 26 odd billion. And of course, the share of the total tax revenue has remained more or less at, a 10-12% range. So you can see the GST is actually a superior form of taxation. And if you read some of the reports that you can find online, conservative estimates say that you actually double the current SST, which you are looking at 52 odd billion, which is in line with the growth had they allowed GST to go on all the way until today. So what does this mean in terms of the math? Now, right now, Malaysia has a budget deficit of 6.5% when compared to GDP, right? But let's say it assumes to the pre-COVID level, because I think this 6.5, 6.2%, a lot of it is driven by a lot of subsidies, once-off expenses to help boost or jumpstart the economy as a result of COVID. And if it returns back to the average, right, of the pre-COVID era of anywhere between 3 to 5%, let's just put it at 4. GST will actually reduce the deficit by roughly 1/3, and because of the way it grows, it will actually reduce the deficit over time. Although it's a bit, it's slow, but it will slowly inch forward into balancing the budget. And another thing as well is that, GST is a very efficient form of taxation. You can ask your tax accountants. It's one of the easiest way to calculate, right? If you take corporate or personal income tax, let's say, you need to check the person's income, you need to check the corporation's income, then you need to look at the deductions and things like that. It gets very complicated. But with the GST, right, it's a goods and services tax. So the minute you spend money, a portion already goes to the government, it's easily tracked, and it grows in tandem with the economy, right? So if the if more people are spending, then the tax revenue goes up. If less people are spending, then it goes down. So in that sense, it's a lot more manageable. However, that one thing has to be said, that the way they structured the GST probably wasn't so good during 2015 to 2017. I think a lot of poor people got hit, and that's probably why the PH government actually won in 2018. So a more sophisticated version of GST probably needs to be introduced, where I guess the rich who don't mind paying more should essentially pay more goods and services tax. So another thing affecting the budget, that's more on the the top line, but in terms of the expenses, the big one is actually the subsidies. So Dato Sri Najib actually wanted to cut sugar, fuel and gas subsidies, and since 2009, or rather since 2010, there's been a gradual decrease, right, all the way until about 2016. Hold on, yes. So it rose all the way to 2012, but then it started going down all the way until his reign ended in 2018. Then it started to go up a bit and go down a bit, and then of course you can see in 2020 the government is earmarking nearly 80 billion to support the economy. So obviously when Dato Sri Najib came up with the plan, he obviously didn't foresee COVID, right? But you can see the general direction is that he wanted to cut subsidies in terms so that it can help balance the budget, right? Now, of course, the big issue with the the time that Najib has spent in the office is the transparency issue, right? Don't need to go into the story of the 1MDB saga. You probably know it already. So, if you look at the 4 key items that make up an ideal policy for stocks or for the stock market, you can see that Dato Sri Najib actually fulfilled 3 of them. And in my point of view, if he just managed the 1MDB thing a lot better, he would have been one of the best, if not the best, prime minister for the Malaysian stock market. Alright guys, before we move on, just to let you know, we have a mentorship program which you can apply for. It's a one-on-one program with you and us to level up your stock investing. Now, not everybody gets in, only 20% of you will get into the interview, and even fewer will actually get the chance to hop onto the program. But if you are excited about this, you can definitely start applying either in the comment section or the description. Okay, so guys, that is what Dato Sri tried to do and actually did during his reign. Now let's look at the opposition, right? Pakatan Harapan. What did they do when they were in power, and how do they relate to my idea of the ideal policy for the stock market? Now, they had this very famous book or buku called Buku Jingga, or the Orange Book in English, where they list out a lot of promises and what they will want to do, what they see, how they see policies, how they see the economy, how they see all these things. So there's a lot of things, but you can pause the video and see what is written on screen. It's not exhaustive. I left out some of them because they were not too related to the economy, but here are what it is, right? So obviously they want more transparency, minimum wage, that will, in my view, affect businesses sometimes negatively. Public infrastructure reform, they don't want monopolies anymore. They do not want privatization for healthcare. They want affordable housing. They want microcredit lending to be easier. They want the salaries of teachers to be on the level of engineers, doctors, and accountants. Now, before I move on, why am I reading off all this? The reason is because all of this actually can contribute to the budget, right? Whether it eases the budget, whether it reduces the deficit, or whether it increases. Now, I can say straight away right now that something like the salaries of teachers being bumped up into the level of engineers, doctors, and accountants will affect the budget, the expenditures. It will increase it. So that's why these are quite relevant, assuming they come true. Now, another one that will definitely affect the budget would be PTPT, and I believe it's somewhere in the 40-50 billion range right now, and they want to give interest-free schemes. All this will affect taxpayers, right? Because essentially they have to pay more. Then they want to guarantee the right of every Malaysian to obtain tertiary and further education at minimal cost. But my view is that once you guarantee that people can get into universities, it means more cost involved. That's just my opinion. And then oil royalties to Sabah and Sarawak, that will affect a lot of the PITA tax, right? The petroleum income tax for Malaysia, which is a big component in our tax revenue, right after, in terms of direct taxes, right below the corporate and personal income tax. They wanted to raise it from 5% to 20%. Again, that will affect the budget as well. They want to abolish tolls. That's another thing that will definitely affect the budget. They want to reduce corporate sector subsidies, which is debatable whether it's a good thing, right? Obviously, they're spending money to reduce corporate sector subsidies, but of course, we have to look at it from a case-by-case basis. Maybe it is better for the country, for the government to actually help some of the corporate sectors when it comes to things like IPPs, which is independent power producers. Now, another one is free Wi-Fi. They didn't really go into how they're going to do it, but for me, all this is just going to add cost, right? Because how are you actually going to give free Wi-Fi? Are you going to tell TM, Timecom, Maxis that they have to charge their internet at zero? Or are they going to tell these guys to charge whatever they want, or at a certain limit, then the government will actually, do it in terms of subsidies? There's no free lunch, guys. No matter what policy, when it comes to the free Wi-Fi, someone's got to pay for it. And typically it's either you or you, right? Maybe you don't pay in the form of every month, but you will pay in the form of taxation, because where is the government getting the money from to pay for all these services? So they had these famous 10 promises in 100 days that they will say they will achieve in 100 days. They didn't quite achieve it. 2 were fulfilled, 5 were partially fulfilled, and 3 in progress. This was in, I believe, somewhere in 2018, 2019. So obviously, not much has transpired since then. And you can say due to bad circumstances and whatnot, but, here's what has happened, essentially. Another thing that they were doing was also they were cancelling projects, right? There was the famous ECRL line with that they wanted to build with China, and then the KL Singapore high-speed rail project, the HSR. Recently, right, our current PM Ismail Sabri has indicated his desire to reintroduce this idea back, want to kickstart this project again. But the basic idea was that when dealing with foreigners, the Pakatan government was actually, I wouldn't say not friendly, but certainly they were cancelling all these different opportunities, right, that would have boosted the Malaysian economy. So when you look at the Pakatan Harapan worldview, right, you can see that they're not that positive for the stock market, right? In terms of foreigners, I wouldn't say they're bad, but they're not good either. PLC reform, they did talk a little bit about how they're going to do it, but compared to Dato' Sri Najib, Najib said that he will reduce from 30 to 12.5%. But I think with regards to the Buku Jingga, they only mentioned that they want to reduce it, and they said that it was an archaic model for corporate governance and whatnot, but they didn't really give much details, and they really didn't put a lot of emphasis, right, into PLC reform. And my point of view is that the budget will take a big hit under them because of all the subsidies, the free Wi-Fi, the interest-free loans, the salary bumps and all that. Though that might be good for the rakyat, certainly it's very debatable as to whether or not that would be good for the budget. Now, apologies for the mistake. I know transparency here is red. I should have put it at orange instead of red. Because I think it was too short, their duration, for them to really see out their plans and whether or not they'll do it in an earnest and honest way. So, to be completely fair, I will reserve judgment as to whether there would have been a more transparent government than BN. Enjoying the video so far? If the answer is yes, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, click on the notification bell so that whenever new videos come out, you know it right away. So guys, let's look at what I think is the conclusion, what's likely to happen. The election is coming up next year, 2023. So we won't know who will win. Of course, who will win will have a big effect, right, on the Malaysian economy for sure. So the first thing was that Najib's policies were actually really, really good right until 1MDB. So that's the big, unfortunate thing about Najib's reign. It was just going so well until, he had to make the mistakes that he made, unfortunately. But I do think that, Pakatan Harapan would have made the stock market worse, right? In fact, in their short tenure, it didn't make the market worse. Although in their defense, right, COVID played a big part in that. They didn't foresee it, call it unlucky. It is what it is. And so the thing about the election is that we don't know who will win, right? Will the opposition win again? Will BN win again? I'm just here to say, who wins will definitely, what do I think will happen depending on who wins, essentially. Now, the last bit, and probably the most important one, is that assuming the existing government stays in power, right? I think they're going to reintroduce the GST, which will be positive for the budget, right? That will, again, start to draw positive foreign attention back to Malaysia, because now the books are a little bit more balanced. PM Ismail Sabri has already indicated his desire to bring back the GST in addition to all the other projects. They have not indicated whether or not they will reform, right, the corporations, the corporate world, the same way Dato Sri Najib will do it. So that's a question mark for me. Now, unfortunately, probably the worst part about the upcoming, if they stay in power, is that there's going to be big amounts of subsidies. And all I can hope for is that it is temporary. Otherwise, we will get into, we will not be at the 3-4% typical budget deficit. We are looking at somewhere closer to 6-7%, and that's not really good, right? And then the last one, which is really another question mark, right, is that they will continue to be transparent, right? I hope that, assuming the existing government stays in power, that they will look at what has happened and they say, okay, let's take, Dato Sri Najib's policies and reform policies, but then stay transparent. And that will give a lot of confidence to the Malaysian public, and which will only lead to foreign confidence as well, because now you have the right policies as well as the right kind of corporate governance. All this will be very good for the Malaysian stock market. If you enjoyed the video and you think that someone can benefit from this video, make sure you share it to them, right? Always interested to know what you all think as well. Let me know in the comments whether you agree with my thoughts or whether you disagree. All criticisms are acceptable to me unless they are completely irrelevant to the topic. And signing off, I'll see you in the next video.